Hello, thank you for joining me today. It's Sunday, so we're going to be reading from the main text of A Course in Miracles, and we're going to start with Chapter 9. That's where we are. Chapter 9 is the acceptance of the atonement. Section 1, the acceptance of reality. Fear of the will of God is one of the strangest beliefs the human mind has ever made. It could not possibly have occurred unless the mind were already profoundly split, making it possible for it to be afraid of what it really is. Reality cannot threaten anything except illusions, since reality can only uphold truth. The very fact that the will of God, which is what you are, is perceived as fearful demonstrates that you are afraid of what you are. It is not then the will of God of which you are afraid, but yours. Your will is not the ego's, and that is why the ego is against you. What seems to be the fear of God is really the fear of your own reality. It is impossible to learn anything consistently in a constant state of panic. If the purpose of this course is to help you remember what you are, and if what you believe that what you are is fearful, then it must follow that you will not learn this course. Yet the reason for this course is that you do not know what you are. If you do not know what your reality is, why would you be so sure that it is fearful? The association of truth and fear, which would be highly artificial at most, is particularly inappropriate in the minds of those who do not know what truth is. All this could mean is that you are arbitrarily associating something beyond your awareness with something you do not want. It is evident then that you are judging something of which you are totally unaware. You have set up this strange situation so that it is impossible to escape from it without a guide who does know what your reality is. The purpose of this guide is merely to remind you of what you want. He is not attempting to force an alien will upon you. He is merely making every possible effort, within the limits you impose on him, to reestablish your own will in your awareness. You have imprisoned your will beyond your own awareness, where it remains but cannot help you. When I said that the Holy Spirit's function is to sort out the true from the false in your mind, I meant that he has the power to look into what you have hidden and recognize the will of God there. His recognition of this will can make it real to you because he is in your mind, and therefore he is your reality. If then his perception of your mind brings its reality to you, he is helping you to remember what you are. The only source of fear in this process is what you think you will lose. Yet it is only what the Holy Spirit sees that you can possibly have. I emphasized many times that the Holy Spirit will never call upon you to sacrifice anything. But if you ask the sacrifice of reality of yourself, the Holy Spirit must remind you that this is not God's will, because it is not yours. There must be no difference between your will and God's. If you did not have a split mind, you would recognize that willing is salvation, because it is communication. It is possible to communicate in alien tongues. You and your Creator can communicate through creation, because that, and only that, is your joint will. A divided mind cannot communicate, because it speaks for different things to the same mind. This loses the ability to communicate simply because confused communication does not mean anything. A message cannot be communicated unless it makes sense. How sensible can your messages be when you ask for what you do not want? Yet as long as you are afraid of your will, that is precisely what you are asking for. You may insist that the Holy Spirit does not answer you, but it might be wiser to consider the kind of questioner you are. You do not ask only for what you want. This is because you are afraid you might receive it, and you would. That is why you persist in asking the teacher who could not possibly give you what you want. Of him, you can never learn what it is, and this gives you the illusion of safety. Yet you cannot be safe from truth, but only in truth. Reality is the only safety. Your will is your salvation because it is the same as God's. The separation is nothing more than the belief that it is different. No mind, no right mind, can believe that its will is stronger than God's. If then a mind believes that its will is different from his, it can only decide either that there is no God or that God's will is fearful. The former accounts for the atheist and the latter for the martyr who believes that God demands sacrifices. Either of these insane decisions will induce panic, because the atheist believes he is alone, and the martyr believes that God is crucifying him. Yet no one really wants either abandonment or retaliation, even though many seek both. Can you ask the Holy Spirit for gifts such as these and actually expect to receive them? He cannot give you something you do not want. When you ask the universal giver for what you do not want, you are asking for what cannot be given because it was never created. It was never created because it was never your will for you. Ultimately, everyone must remember the will of God, because ultimately everyone must recognize himself. This recognition is the recognition that his will and God's are one. In the presence of truth, there are no unbelievers and no sacrifices. In the security of reality, fear is totally meaningless. To deny what can only seem to be fear. Let me try that again. To deny what is can only seem to be fearful. Fear cannot be real without a cause, and God is the only cause. God is love, and you do not want him. This is your will. Ask for this, and you will be answered, because you will be asking only for what belongs to you. When you ask the Holy Spirit for what would hurt you, he cannot answer because nothing can hurt you, and so you are asking for nothing. Any wish that stems from the ego is a wish for nothing, and to ask for it is not a request. It is merely a denial in the form of a request. The Holy Spirit is not concerned with form, being only aware of meaning. The ego cannot ask the Holy Spirit for anything because there is complete communication failure between them. Yet you can ask for everything of the Holy Spirit because your requests to him are real, being of your right mind. Would the Holy Spirit deny the will of God? And could he fail to recognize it in his son or child? You do not recognize the enormous waste of energy you expend in denying truth. What would you say of someone who persists in attempting the impossible, believing that to achieve it is to succeed? The belief that you must have the impossible in order to be happy is totally at variance with the principle of creation. God could not will that happiness depended on what you could never have. The fact that God is love does not require belief, but it does require acceptance. It is indeed possible for you to deny facts, although it is impossible for you to change them. If you hold your hands over your eyes, you will not see because you are interfering with the laws of seeing. If you deny love, you will not know it because your cooperation is the law of its being. You cannot change laws you did not make, and the laws of happiness were created for you, not by you. Any attempt to deny what is must be fearful, and if the attempt is strong, it will induce panic. Willing against reality, though impossible, can be made into a very persistent goal, even though you do not want it. But consider the result of this strange decision. You are devoting your mind to what you do not want. How real can this devotion be? If you do not want it, it was never created. If it was never created, it is nothing. Can you really devote yourself to nothing? God, in his devotion to you, created you devoted to everything and gave you what you are devoted to. Otherwise, you would not have been created perfect. Reality is everything, and you have everything because you are real. You cannot make the unreal because the absence of reality is fearful, and fear cannot be created. As long as you believe that fear is possible, you will not create. Opposing orders of reality make reality meaningless, and reality is meaning. Remember then that God's will is already possible, and nothing else will ever be. This is the simple acceptance of reality, because only that is real. You cannot distort reality and know what it is. And if you do distort reality, you will experience anxiety, depression, and ultimately panic because you are trying to make yourself unreal. When you feel these things, do not try to look beyond yourself for truth can only be within you. Say, therefore, Christ is in me, and where he is, God must be, for Christ is part of him. Section 2 of Chapter 9. The answer to prayer. Everyone who ever tried to use prayer to ask for something has experienced what appears to be failure. This is not only true in connection with specific things that might be harmful, but also in connection with requests that are strictly in line with this course. The latter in particular might be incorrectly interpreted as proof that the course does not mean what it says. You might remember, however, that the course states, and repeatedly, that its purpose is to escape from fear. Let us suppose, then, that what you ask of the Holy Spirit is what you really want, but you are still afraid of it. Should this be the case, your attainment of it would no longer be what you want. This is why certain specific forms of healing are not achieved, even when the state of healing is. An individual may ask for physical healing because he is fearful of bodily harm. At the same time, if he were healed physically, the threat to his thought system might be considerably more fearful to him than its physical expression. In this case, he is not really asking for release from fear, but for the removal of a symptom that he himself selected. This request is, therefore, not for healing at all. The Bible emphasizes that all prayer is answered, and this is indeed true. The very fact that the Holy Spirit has been asked for anything will ensure a response. Yet it is equally certain that no response given him will ever be one that would increase fear. It is possible that his answer will not be heard. It is impossible, however, that it will be lost. There are many answers you have already received, but have not yet heard. I assure you that they are waiting for you. If you would know your prayers are answered, never doubt a Son of God. Do not question him and do not confound him, for your faith in him is your faith in yourself. If you would know God and his answer, believe in me, whose faith in you cannot be shaken. Can you ask the Holy Spirit truly and doubt your brother? Believe his words are true because of the truth that is in him. You will unite with the truth in him, and his words will be true. As you hear him, you will hear me. Listening to truth is the only way you can hear it now and finally know it. Listening to the truth is the only way you can hear it now and finally know it. The message your brother gives you is up to you. What does he say to you? What would you have him say? Your decision about him determines the message you receive. Remember that the Holy Spirit is in him, and his voice speaks to you through him. What can so holy a brother tell you except truth? But are you listening to it? Your brother may not know who he is, but there is a light in his mind that does know. This light can shine into yours, giving truth to his words and making you able to hear him. His words are the Holy Spirit's answer to you. Is your faith in him strong enough to let you hear him? You can no more pray for yourself alone than you can find joy for yourself alone. Prayer is the restatement of inclusion directed at the Holy Spirit under the laws of God. Salvation is of your brother. The Holy Spirit extends from your mind to his and answers you. You cannot hear the voice for God in yourself alone because you are not alone. And his answer is only for what you are. You will not know the trust I have in you unless you extend it. You will not trust the guidance of the Holy Spirit or believe that it is for you unless you hear it in others. It must be for your brother because it is for you. Would God have created a voice for you alone? Could you hear his answer except as he answers all of his God's sons? Hear of your brother what you would have me hear of you, for you would not want me to be deceived. I love for the truth in you as God. I love you for the truth in you as God does. Your deceptions may deceive you, but they cannot deceive me. Knowing what you are, I cannot doubt you. I hear only the Holy Spirit in you, who speaks to me through you. If you would hear me, hear my brothers in whom God's voice speaks. The answer to all prayers lies in them. You will be answered as you hear the answer in everyone. Do not listen to anything else, or you will not hear truly. Believe in your brothers because I believe in you, and you will learn that my belief in you is justified. Believe in me by believing in them for the sake of what God gave them. They will answer you if you learn to ask only truth of them. Do not ask for blessings without blessing them, for only in this way can you learn how blessed you are. By following this way, you are seeking the truth in you. This is not going beyond yourself, but toward yourself. Hear only God's answer in his sons, and you are answered. To disbelieve is to side against or to attack. To believe is to accept and to side with. To believe is to not be credulous, but to accept and appreciate. What you do not believe, you do not appreciate, and you cannot be grateful for what you do not value. There is a price you will pay for judgment, because judgment is the setting of a price, and as you set it, you will pay it. If paying is equated with getting, you will set the price low but demand a high return. You will have forgotten, however, that your return is in proportion to your judgment of worth. If paying is associated with giving, it cannot be perceived as loss, and the reciprocal relationship of giving and receiving will be recognized. The price will then be set high because of the value of the return. The price for getting it is to lose sight of value, making it inevitable that you will not value what you receive. Valuing it little, you will not appreciate it, and you will not want it. Never forget, then, that you set the value on what you receive and price it by what you give. To believe that it is possible to get much for little is to believe that you can bargain with God. God's laws are always fair and perfectly consistent. By giving, you receive. But to receive is to accept, not to get. It is impossible not to have, but it is possible not to know you have. The recognition of having is the willingness for giving. And only this willingness can you recognize what you have. Only by this willingness can you recognize what you have. What you give is therefore the value you put on what you have, being the exact measure of the value you put upon it. And this, in return, is the measure of how much you want it. You can ask of the Holy Spirit, then, only by giving to him, and you can give to him only where you recognize him. If you recognize him in everyone, consider how much you will be asking of him and how much you will receive. He will deny you nothing because you have denied him nothing, and so you can share everything. This is the way and the only way to have his answer, because his answer is all you can ask for and want. Say then to everybody, because I will to know myself, I see you as God's son and my brother. So we could change that to read, because I will to know myself, I see you as God's child and my sibling. That gets rid of some of the heavy male energy. Section 3 of Chapter 9, the correction of error. The alertness of the ego to the errors of other egos is not the kind of vigilance the Holy Spirit would have you maintain. Egos are critical in terms of the kind of sense they stand for. They understand this kind of sense because it is sensible to them. To the Holy Spirit, it makes no sense at all. To the ego, it is kind and right and good to point out errors and correct them. This makes perfect sense to the ego, which is unaware of what errors are and what correction is. Errors are of the ego, and correction of errors lies in the relinquishment of the ego. When you correct a brother, you are telling him that he is wrong. He may be making no sense at the time, and it is certain that if he is speaking from the ego, he will not be making sense. But your task is still to tell him he is right. You do not tell him this verbally if he is speaking foolishly. He needs correction at another level because his error is at another level. He is still right, because he is a child of God. His ego is always wrong, no matter what it does or says. If you point out the errors of your brother or sister's ego, you must be seeing through yours, because the Holy Spirit does not perceive his errors. This must be true, since there is no communication between the ego and Holy Spirit. The ego makes no sense, and the Holy Spirit does not attempt to understand anything that arises from it. Since he does not understand it, he does not judge it, knowing that nothing the ego makes means anything. When you react let me try that again. When you react at all to errors, you are not listening to the Holy Spirit. He has merely disregarded them, and if you attend to them, you are not hearing him. If you do not hear him, you are listening to your ego and making as little sense as the brother whose errors you perceive. This cannot be correction. Yet it is more than merely a lack of correction for him. It is the giving up of correction in yourself. I want to pause for a second in the reading and see if I can give this some day-to-day context. So what we're talking about here is what we do all the time. We look out at what other people are doing and we judge them and we say they shouldn't be doing that. We can probably all think of things that are happening at the national level in America, and we probably have all fallen into that trap today, yesterday, and we'll probably do it tomorrow. We'll look at the TV and we'll say that's wrong. That's not right. We do it to each other in our daily basis. We do it to children all the time. It's part of what we need to learn how not to do to children, definitely. So that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about that impulse that we have when we look around the room at people or at things and we make decisions that things are wrong, people are wrong. All right, continuing on with the reading. When a brother behaves insanely, you can heal him only by perceiving the sanity in him. If you perceive his errors and accept them, you are accepting yours. If you want to give yours over to the Holy Spirit, you must do this with his. Unless this becomes the way in which you handle all errors, you cannot understand how all errors are undone. How is this different from telling you that what you teach, you learn? Your brother is as right as you are, and if you think he is wrong, you are condemning yourself. You cannot correct yourself. Is it possible then for you to correct another? Let's stop for a second. You cannot correct yourself because there is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing to correct. You are divinity in form. Your actions might require consideration, but you, who you are, fundamentally, you cannot correct because there is nothing wrong with you. This is fundamental to these teachings. Reading again. You cannot correct yourself. Is it possible then for you to correct another? Yet you can see him truly, because it is possible for you to see yourself truly. It is not up to you to change your brother or sister, but merely to accept him or her as they are. Their errors do not come from the truth that is in them, and only this truth is yours. Their errors cannot change this, and can have no effect at all on the truth in you. To perceive errors in anyone and to react to them as if they were real is to make them real to you. You will not escape paying the price for this, not because you are being punished for it, but because you are following the wrong guide and will therefore lose your way. Your brother's or sister's errors are not of him any more than yours are of you. Accept their errors as real, and you have attacked yourself. If you would find your way and keep it, see only truth beside you for your walk together. The Holy Spirit in you forgives all things in you and in your brothers and sisters. Their errors are forgiven with yours. Atonement is no more separate than love. Atonement cannot be separate because it comes from love. Any attempt you make to correct a brother means that you believe correction by you is possible, and this can only be arrogance of the ego. Correction is of God, who does not know of arrogance. The Holy Spirit forgives everything because God created everything. Do not undertake his function, or you will forget yours. Accept only the function of healing in time, because that is what time is for. God gave you the function to create in eternity. You do not need to learn that, but you do need to learn to want it. For that all learning was made. This is the Holy Spirit's use of an ability that you do not need, but that you made. Give it to him. You do not understand how to use it. He will teach you how to see yourself without condemnation by learning how to look on everything without it. Condemnation will then not be real to you, and all your errors will be forgiven. Such great content. All right, we'll move on to section 4. I think that will probably be the last section that we read for this Sunday. It's been working well to break these chapters into 2 readings because they are so long. The Holy Spirit's plan for forgiveness. Again, we are still in chapter 9, section 4. And let's just review. This was the thing I was pausing for a moment ago. I knew there was something I wanted to go over. Atonement. Remember that word is really at one-ment. That is what it means, becoming one. The Holy Spirit's plan for forgiveness. Atonement is for all, because it is the way to undo the belief that anything is for you alone. To forgive is to overlook. Look then beyond error and do not let your perception rest upon it, for you will believe what your perception holds. Accept as true only what your brother or sister is, if you would know yourself. Perceive what they are is not. Perceive what, let me try. I'm trying to substitute, non-masculine pronouns, and it might be a little difficult for this reading, so I may just read this straight. Perceive what he is not, and you cannot know what you are, because you see him falsely. So him or her, you see, whenever you perceive anybody as what they are not, you cannot know what you are, because you are seeing them falsely. Remember always that your identity is shared and that its sharing is its reality. You have a part to play in the atonement, but the plan of the atonement is beyond you. You do not understand how to overlook errors, or you would not make them. It would merely be further error to believe either that you do not make them or that you can correct them without a guide to correction. And if you do not follow this guide, your errors will not be corrected. The plan is not yours because of your limited ideas about what you are. This sense of limitation is where all errors arise. The way to undo them, therefore, is not of you, but for you. The atonement is a lesson in sharing, which is given because you have forgotten how to do it. The Holy Spirit merely reminds you of the natural use of your abilities. By reinterpreting the ability to attack into the ability to share, He translates what you have made into what God created. If you would accomplish this through Him, you cannot look on your abilities through the eyes of the ego, or you will judge them as it does. All their harmfulness lies in the ego's judgment. All of their helpfulness lies in the judgment of the Holy Spirit. The ego, too, has a plan of forgiveness because you are asking for one, though not of the right teacher. The ego's plan, of course, makes no sense and will not work. By following its plan, you will merely place yourself in an impossible situation to which the ego always leads you. The ego's plan is to have you see error clearly first and then overlook it. Yet how can you overlook what you have made real? By seeing it clearly, you have made it real and cannot overlook it. This is where the ego is forced to appeal to mysteries, insisting that you must accept the meaningless to save yourself. Many have tried to do this in my name, forgetting that my words make perfect sense because they come from God. They are as sensible now as they ever were because they speak of ideas that are eternal. Forgiveness that is learned of me does not use fear to undo fear, nor does it make real the unreal and then destroy it. Forgiveness through the Holy Spirit lies simply in looking beyond error from the beginning and thus keeping it unreal for you. Do not let any belief in its realness enter your mind, or you will also believe that you must undo what you have made in order to be forgiven. What has no effect does not exist, and to the Holy Spirit the effects of error are non-existent. By steadily and consistently canceling out all of its effects, everywhere and in all respects, He teaches that the ego does not exist and proves it. Follow the Holy Spirit's teaching in forgiveness then, because forgiveness is His function, and He knows how to fulfill it perfectly. That is what I meant when I said that miracles are natural, and when they do not occur, something has gone wrong. Miracles are merely the sign of your willingness to follow the Holy Spirit's plan of salvation, recognizing that you do not understand what it is. His work is not your function, and unless you accept this, you cannot learn what your function is. Confusion of functions is so typical of the ego that you should be quite familiar with it by now. The ego believes that all functions belong to it, even though it has no idea what they are. This is more than mere confusion. It is a particularly dangerous combination of grandiosity and confusion that makes the ego likely to attack anyone and anything for no reason at all. This is exactly what the ego does. It is unpredictable in its responses because it has no idea of what it perceives. If you have no idea what is happening, how appropriately can you expect to react? You might ask yourself, regardless of how you may account for the reaction, whether its unpredictability places the ego in a sound position as your guide. Let me repeat that the ego's qualifications as a guide are singularly unfortunate, and that it is a remarkably poor choice as a teacher of salvation. Anyone who elects a totally insane guide must be totally insane himself. Nor is it true that you do not realize the guide is insane. You realize it because I realize it, and you have judged it by the same standard I have. The ego literally lives on borrowed time, and its days are numbered. Do not fear the last judgment, but welcome it, and do not wait, for the ego's time is borrowed from your eternity. This is the second coming that was made for you as the first was created. The second coming is merely the return of sense. Can this possibly be fearful? What can be fearful but fantasy? And who turns to fantasy unless he despairs of finding satisfaction in reality? Yet it is certain that you will never find satisfaction in reality, so that your only hope is to change your mind about reality. Only if the decision that reality is fearful is wrong can God be right. But this is only because you did not know who you were. Had you known, you could no more have been wrong than God can. The impossible can only happen in fantasy. When you search in reality for fantasies, you will not find it. The symbols of fantasy are of ego, and of these you will find many. But do not look for meaning in them. They have no more meaning than the fantasies into which they were woven. Fairy tales can be pleasant or fearful, but no one calls them true. Children may believe them, and so for a while the tales are true for them. Yet when reality dawns, the fantasies are gone. Reality has not gone in the meanwhile. The second coming is the awareness of reality, not its return. Behold, my child, reality is here. It belongs to you and me and God, and is perfectly satisfying to all of us. Only this awareness heals, because it is the awareness of truth. We'll call that the end for today's reading. This is a very intense chapter, and for those of you that are new to these concepts, you might want to listen to this every day for a while to sort of drum the concepts in. We are all divinity in form. Therefore, there is nothing wrong here. Nothing's wrong. Regardless of all the appearances of everything that looks wrong, there is nothing wrong here. And until we remember and embrace the fact that we're divinity in form, and we stop judging each other, until we come to these conclusions, the world is not going to change. But the world is really on the brink of great change, because you and I are waking up. And so thank you for joining me today. If you have questions, you can message me, 907-351-3003. The daily lessons roll out at midnight Alaska time on Facebook in the Love by Light group. And I will see you again next Sunday. for the rest of Chapter 9. Namaste.